there going to come a point at which you're going to flee or need to flee?
No, no, we're not going to do that, David. I understand that you bring the topic up with respect, and please forgive my vociferous tone, but we get this all of the time. It's wrong. It's wrong to suggest that we should give up, that we should capitulate to barbarianism, that we should go to another country, Australia, New Zealand, and subject our children to the same pornography and abortion and liberal values that are being imposed upon us here in South Africa, as in the United States of America and Canada and Europe. This imposition, this external imposition, because it is not an articulation of either the Western European genetic pool or of the Christian tradition of European-derived cultures. These things are externally imposed upon us, and they're going to be imposed upon us wherever we go. So we might as well stand fast here now.
You found it. It's The Real News with your host, David Knight.
All right, let's talk about what's going on in South Africa. I want to go down this chart that basically breaks down what has happened in the last couple of months. I want to play a quick clip from the South African Parliament that is voting to take away land, because this is something that is just now happening. I mean, we've got Forbes and we've got Bloomberg talking about what's going on, and we're going to get it straight from an individual who is there in South Africa, Simon Roche. But just again, go back to this this graphic. In just the first 2 months of this year, 102 farm attacks. That's 1.7 farm attacks a day. One farmer is murdered every 5 days. There have been, when you look at these attacks in this graphic, they break it down as to when these attacks happen. 46% of them, the overwhelming majority, happen between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning. They come by night. And the average number of attackers, for those where they know, because a lot of times if they kill everybody in the farm, you don't know how many attackers there were. But of the ones where there are some survivors, you have the average number of attackers is 3. But the most that they've seen is 11. So one of these attacks, it was 11 people. So you got a dozen people coming for you in the middle of the night. Why? Because you're white. Because you're white. So joining us now is Simon Roche. You can find, as I pointed out, they have began as of March the 1st. They began a campaign to raise money to help those people defend themselves. And it's very vital. They said they need diesel fuel, for example. This website where you can go to contribute to them is freestarter.com. That's STARTR, freestartr.com. And you can also find him at suidlanders.org. That's SUIDLANDERS.org. So joining us now is Simon Roche, head of the office of the headquarters of the world's largest non-state civil defense organization, Suidlanders of South Africa. Thank you for joining us, Simon.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Knight.
Tell us a little bit. I gave the stats of the first couple of months, and actually I was going to play that clip. Before we start talking about this, to put this in perspective for the American audience, let's play that clip of clip 5 of the South African Parliament voting to take the land, because this is something that's just happened in the last couple of weeks. I talked to you a couple of months ago, but this is building. Let's play that clip.
On Tuesday, South Africans, through their publicly elected representatives in Parliament, voted overwhelmingly in support of a motion to accelerate equitable land redistribution through expropriation of land without compensation. Some have become very hopeful, some have become very fearful. It is a question that we will continue to handle with care and with responsibility as the government. There will be no smash and grab of land in our country. That we will not allow.
All right, but the smash and grab is already happening, and as we look at the Parliament talking about this stuff, I'm reminded of the expression, democracy is just two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. And they've got more than enough votes to change the Constitution, don't they, Mr. Roche?
Yeah, that's right. They've got about 75% of the votes, and they only need 66%. So it's going to go through.
Yeah, yeah. And so what they have done is first they started on a process where they were I guess, forcing you to sell land back to the government, and they were doing some compensation. Then they said, well, let's not do as much compensation. Then they just came out and said, let's not give them any money at all.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. They had a willing buyer, willing seller process for many years. It began in the late 90s. And they said that the process would only last for about 10 years, if I recall correctly. And it was very, very widely broadcast across the length and the breadth of South Africa. And they encouraged people, let's say clans or tribes or families, who believed that their land had been taken from them by white people, to approach the government with a claim to get that land back, and then the government would buy out those farmers. However, it was a shambles, an absolute joke, a fairy tale, because as has recently been demonstrated by Dr. Anthea Jeffrey of the Institute of Race Relations, in 92.7% of the cases of successful claims, the claimants in the end said, you know what, we don't really want the land. Can we have the money instead? On top of that, bearing in mind that South Africa only has about 45,000 commercial farms, on top of that, 4,323 of the successfully claimed farms are now lying fallow. This was demonstrated recently by the Rolf Meyer Institute.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We're going to come back, Mr. Roche, we're going to come back to you and let us know more about what's going on in South Africa. It was a breadbasket, may turn into starvation. And joining us from South Africa is Simon Roche with Suidlanders.org. That's SUIDLANDERS.org. He is head of the office of the headquarters of the world's largest non-state civil defense organization, and they are going to need your help and your understanding. We're trying to talk about what has happened. Things are changing very rapidly now in South Africa, now that the Marxists are in power. And as we look at these issues, you know, we had Jim Crow here in the American South. They had apartheid in South Africa. And now that these people have gotten in power, the Marxists, who basically used to say that blacks could not own land, now they're saying whites cannot own land. They just flipped that narrative. Kind of like our new Jim Crow laws from our Socialist Democrat Party, who is now are actively excluding Americans from certain activities or jobs and having their quotas about everything. It's going to get much worse if we keep going down this road that the Democrats in this country have put us on. They're just like the Marxists in South Africa, the Socialists and the Democrat Party. But, sir, tell us a little bit about, we were just talking about this process that has now begun. They said they were going to have just and equitable compensation, meaning that they weren't going to pay market price. Then they just came out, these Marxists, and said, we're not going to pay them anything. We're just going to take the land.
Their previous policy has absolutely failed. 92.7% of the successful applicants didn't want the land and didn't take it. Of those who did take the land through a successful application process, 4,323 farms are lying fallow, and they haven't been occupied. So the whole thing is a fabrication. It's a nonsense. It's an absolute rubbish story. So now they've said, well, our policy has failed, so gee, we'll take the land and we'll not pay compensation at all, which illustrates to you that it was never about justice or equality or fixing the ills of the past. It's about vengeance and spite, strictly and solely, and anybody with common sense can look at the evidence and arrive at that conclusion for themselves.
And it's also about having an enemy that they can organize against, which is what Marxists do, regardless of what color they are, whether they're white, black, or Asian. They will always focus on an enemy. And when we look at what Marx did, he killed 78 million people, but tens of millions of those people died with starvation policies because the communists, as they take over everything, and as you're pointing out, so many of these farms are just lying there empty. Nobody's working them. Nobody's growing any food. So you're going to go down the path that we've seen in Rhodesia, which became Zimbabwe. They used to be a major producer of agriculture. Now the people there are having not only hyperinflation, but they're starving in that country because the Marxists don't care about anything but power.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to have an enemy so that they can control everybody. So they identify a sector of the population, in our case, white people, in your case, Americans, because we are very, very much the canary in the coal mine. So much of what is happening in the USA is a sort of an echo of what has happened in South Africa. They identify an enemy, and then they say to the rest of the people, look, for your sake, we have to take certain actions. So, for example, they'll say that we have to reduce gun rights, or we want to call in guns so that innocent people don't get hurt. And it sounds ever so reasonable. But the classic illustration of that is here in South Africa. They asked for people to hand their guns in, and many people did. But what they lost sight of is, or what we lost sight of, is that the overwhelming majority of gun owners in South Africa, legal gun owners, are white. And yet the number of guns owned by white people, these guns that supposedly are a threat to people's lives and safety and what have you, is fewer than the number of weapons brought into South Africa by the ANC during the struggle period that were then lost. Of the 10 million or so weapons that they brought in, 2 million have been lost. So if crimes are being committed with weapons, it is the illegal weapons of the African National Congress. But of course, they say the chap who's sitting at home with a gun to defend his family is really the cause of the problem. And for his own sake, we're going to take his gun away from him. They're very clever.
Now, you used to be a member of the ANC. You were against apartheid. You realized that that was wrong. But now you have seen that that really wasn't what they were after. It was simply a narrative that they were using to seize power, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just a narrative. There's not much more to say, really. I've recognized over time that it was all a fiction, all a fable. It was all made up. One thing after another that was promised and assured was subsequently ignored and just went away quietly, and people complacently accepted it. But I'm one of the, I suppose, fewer people who believed that if somebody doesn't stand up and do something, then nobody's going to do anything, and we're just going to get steamrolled, as, with respect, and I say that with respect, outside of the right wing of the USA, outside of the InfoWars channel, the overwhelming majority of Americans are complacently accepting the bizarre nature of the change in their society over the past generation or less.
Yes, and I would say, as I began, by saying that it really hasn't changed. I mean, you had apartheid before, where one group based on their skin color could not buy land. And now you've got apartheid again, where one group based on its skin color cannot buy land. When you buy land in South Africa, they're going to register what skin color you are. And when they take this land and they redistribute it, I mean, I'm presuming that white people can't buy that land when they do that. So now you still have apartheid, but now they're threatening, making veiled threats about cutting the neck of white privilege, saying we're going to take the land now. We're not calling for the murder of all whites yet. And so what they're now doing is they've reestablished apartheid and just different colors, but they're now threatening genocide, aren't they?
They are threatening genocide. There have been numerous references to genocide. Our Minister of Defense declared on, if I'm not mistaken, the 2nd or 3rd of November, it was a Tuesday or a Thursday, Wednesday or a Thursday, that if whites protest peacefully against rapes and murders on farms, once more, they will begin a civil war, it will initiate a civil war, and they will bring a genocide upon themselves. So that's one of many examples. So
wow, don't protest or we'll kill you. So it's don't
exactly.
protest or we'll kill you all.
Yeah, if you get all uppity about this rape story, for example, then yes, we're going to kill you all. Explicitly, your viewers can go and look it up on YouTube. It's there for the world to behold.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing, the quotes that we're seeing from Malema, who's head of the Marxist Party. But it's the majority ruling party that is essentially enacting his politics, his policies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite clear that the Marxist Party has stolen the political territory of the Communist Party, and I urge your viewers to be cognizant of the fact that Nelson Mandela remained clandestinely, as was revealed later on, up until the day of his death, a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of South Africa. The African National Congress is a proxy for the South African Communist Party. This is a fact, not an opinion. Now, the Julius Malema Party is more of a Marxist party than a pure communist party. And they've stolen political territory from the ANC, from the communists, and now the ANC is desperately trying to wrest it back by being as radical as the economic freedom fighters, to the extent that we recently had a call by a senior African National Congress. He's the head of the African National Congress's militia, which still exists, believe it or not, the Mkhonto we Sizwe, the spear of the nation. Incredibly, it still exists. He recently called for young blacks to join training camps in the bush to learn to fight whites in a civil war. Yesterday, a very widely circulated message came to our attention, and we checked up to see that we verified it, basically. And again, there is a call from out of the ranks of the ANC directing young blacks to training camps with telephone numbers, directions, phone us, we'll help you.
Wow. So they're surrogates, and they're encouraging this. They're encouraging this. We've got to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back. We've got one more segment with Simon Roche out of South Africa telling us what's going on there, and it's a familiar pattern. We have politicians who are fomenting racism and hatred, creating a common enemy for their political power. We've seen this all too often, especially in Marxist countries. We're going to talk to them about what they're going to do about it when we come back. We're talking to Simon Roche out of South Africa. And as we're talking about the situation there, things have changed very rapidly. One article from the Gateway Pundit points out that back in 2011, Julius Malema, he's the leader now of one of the Marxist parties there, because there's a couple of them, was arrested for playing a song, Kill the Boar, Kill the White Man. And now, just this last week, the South African Parliament has voted to confiscate land from white farmers without any payment, just last week. And then this last Sunday night, the same guy, Julius Malema, who 7 years ago was arrested for playing songs that call for the murder of people, said, go after a white man. We are cutting the throat of whiteness. And so my question to you, Mr. Roche, there as you've got a civil defense organization that you're trying to help each other. I mean, you've got two major parties that are pandering and also inflaming hatred and racism and killing the white man in South Africa. What do you do about this? Because you're very dispersed in these farms. As we talked about at the beginning of this interview, they will come in numbers after the farmers in the dead of night. You guys are kind of isolated, each of you, and you're at a tremendous disadvantage in terms of the number of people there. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you? What is the plan for defense?
Well, if I may quickly point this out, 2 days after the motion was adopted to pursue the expropriation of farms without compensation, another motion was put before the Parliament to nationalize the Reserve Bank. Now, what we've been saying to people is that the confiscation of the farms is one thing, but what it will precipitate, and this should be our immediate concern, and it touches on what you've just mentioned, is that it will give a license to ne'er-do-wells, to crooks, to gangsters, to these murderers and rapists to become more active. In other words, they'll be saying, well, the big man, the big African man, the big boss, the president says that the whites are bad and they're going to take the farms away from them. So therefore, surely we must be able to do these bad things. And we've seen a year-on-year increase in farm attacks from the 1st of January to the end of February, as you showed, from 22 to 102. And this morning I've seen figures of attacks that hadn't been reported, verifiable figures, by the way, that in fact the true figure of attacks between the beginning of January and the end of February is 119. Now, with that in mind, the answer to your question is that although we are the largest organization of our kind in the world, we are persona non grata in the new South African rainbow nation utopia. It is very, very, very difficult for us to raise funds, extremely difficult. And therefore, as you can imagine, we are endeavoring to prepare a comprehensive civil defense plan, which will gather people into safe areas. Tomorrow, I will drive down to a remote area of South Africa and spend a week reconnoitering safe havens for refugees on the tops of certain mountains. We're endeavoring to put this plan into action, but with extremely limited resources. So every day is a struggle. Our phones are tapped, our computers are hacked. It's a joke. That would take an entire episode to describe to you. we're struggling to put this plan into place, and we're basically begging the world to please help us to preserve a culture. 119 farm attacks in 2 months. We are being slaughtered like flies, and we really need a little bit of help to stand tough against these madmen.
Tell people where they can go to give you help.
Well, we would encourage people to participate in the Free Starter campaign that Charles C. Johnson has put together. God bless him. It's freestarter.com. Free, STARTR, no last E.com. Very easy to find. Our campaign is easy to find on that homepage. If people scroll down, it's right there. Also, if people wish to donate, otherwise they can donate via PayPal on our website, which is suidlanders.org, SUID landers.org, and there is a PayPal link in the bottom right-hand corner of the homepage.
And, you know, people need to understand, we had so many people in America talking, big media, big Hollywood, calling for boycotts of South Africa and everything throughout apartheid. You were part of the ANC. You wanted to see apartheid end. You understood that that was wrong. We understood that Jim Crow laws were wrong in the South. But now what we have seen is that they have continued apartheid. And now they're talking about going beyond that to genocide, to democide, you know, where the government has all the guns and kills people. That's really what it is. It begins with genocide. But, you know, once they get rid of the white people, they're not going to stop with that. Then you're going to have the black people who are in power. They're going to find a different tribe there. They may have the same skin color, but they'll find some other group to exterminate after they exterminate the white people. This is the way that it always happened. I mean, look at the Hutus and the Tutsis. There weren't any white people involved in that, but we have seen this pattern everywhere, in Cambodia and elsewhere, these kinds of killing fields. Is there any idea? I know you guys are organizing to stay there and to fight, and there's some people who are saying if President Trump should allow refugees from South Africa, we can tell who people are, unlike so many of the countries that we bring people into. We don't know if they were the ones who were the terrorists who were fomenting the war or if they were victims, but we can tell who the people in South Africa are. You've got records that could be shown. I think if that is not extended, if that hand is not extended to South Africa, it shows the duplicity in this refugee program, which you've already seen under Obama, keeping out Christians who are severely persecuted in Muslim areas, but then bringing in all the Muslims in those areas. But what is the feeling there in terms of, you know, you're going to fight, but is there going to come a point at which you're going to flee or need to flee?
No, we're not going to do that, David. I understand that you bring the topic up with respect, and please forgive my vociferous tone, but we get this all of the time. It's wrong. It's wrong to suggest that we should give up, that we should capitulate to barbarianism, that we should go to another country, Australia, New Zealand, and subject our children to the same pornography and abortion and liberal values that are being imposed upon us here in South Africa, as in the United States of America and Canada and Europe. This imposition, this external imposition, because it is not an articulation of either the Western European genetic pool or of the Christian tradition of European-derived cultures. These things are externally imposed upon us, and they're going to be imposed upon us wherever we go. So we might as well stand fast here now.
Good for you. Good for you. Good for you. Live free or die. That used to be the spirit of America.
That was the spirit of our forefathers. That was the spirit that built the world, David. It's not to say that every other culture is bad or every other race is useless or this or that or the religions or whatever. But our people are good people who've done good things throughout the whole world. We deserve to be able to hold our heads high and not feel shame for crimes that we didn't even commit in the first place. We deserve the Western European Christian tradition of the world deserves to be able to look itself in the mirror and say, you are not so bad.
That's right. And we see that same spirit here in America as they desire to tear down every monument to anything that is any good. They will go through and they will isolate something out of everybody is human. You can find something that is wrong in everybody. You can find something that is wrong in every society. They will focus on the negative, but their goal is to tear down the good. Their goal is to tear down Western civilization. I mean, these same people who want to go in and tear down statues of Christopher Columbus or Robert E. Lee or even leaders from the other side of the Civil War that they don't know anything about. These same people want to go out and put up a statue of Marion Barry, who went to prison because he was corrupt and smoking crack and everything. I mean, certainly this guy had his problem. Maybe they want to celebrate what they liked about Marion Barry. I don't know what they liked about Marion Barry. But, you know, you can go in and you can find this about everybody. They want to purge Churchill. They want to purge Robert E. Lee, even Abraham Lincoln or Ulysses S. Grant. That is the spirit. As you pointed out, we cannot give in to that. Good for you for standing up for that. Good for you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the good Americans, Europeans, and others, but this being an American channel and an American show, thank you very, very much. This is a heartfelt thank you to all of you who have supported us and who continue to support us. We bless you before God.
Well, we really do hope the best for you. And, you know, you're welcome to come on anytime and to tell us what is going on. I know that things are changing very rapidly there. People need to understand what is happening because you don't stand alone. This is a globalist agenda. Marxism is something that has been a pox upon the entire world. And what they do is they want to destroy every society so they can rebuild it with themselves at the top. And you're talking about the fact how it is the absolute scum of society who use these types of revolutions to put them in charge of everybody else. Good for you for standing up. Thank you, Simon Roche. You can find this his website and how to help him at suidlanders.org. That's SUIDLANDERS.org. Thank you. Good luck to you, sir. May God be with you.
Good day, and God bless you.
We've taken Brain Force and made it Brain Force Plus. Now with 20% more in the bottle and an even more hardcore formula. You owe it to yourself to get these products. They really have worked for myself, my family. They have 5-star reviews by the thousands. InfoWarsLife.com.